So now we're live. Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch 273. This is in honor of the birthday of Ira Hakohen Katz, our executive producer, and should have a good gesunte yar and health and parnasa and all good things and all the brachas and Mashiach now.
And a shidduch.
And a shidduch too, for sure.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
right.
Okay.
How long are we going for tonight?
Ungish stuff with gelt, right.
Yeah, totally.
Look at that picture. I love the picture.
Tonight's not a regular time. Tonight's not a regular time cheer. So what time? What's our timing tonight?
We keep going until we can't.
Till we drop. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. Ein kiddush al makim seuda. We only make kiddush in the place of the meal. Shem kiddush b'bayis zavach b'bayis acher. That if you make kiddush in this house and ate in a different house, bein shehaya daitem lechatchila lechel b'bayis acher. Whether or not he had intention to go from one house to another house, bein shekiddush al das lechel b'bayis zeh. Or if he was intending to eat here and then he changed his mind and ended up going to another house. He did not fulfill his obligation for the meal. And by the way, this is a fairly stringent position he's taking. Just to give a tiny bit of background, there's a Gemara about this of whether it's valid or not. And there's different opinions that come up that has anywhere from it's okay if you had it in mind, or if you didn't have it in mind, but there's a whole bunch of opinions. The Alter Rebbe is of the opinion that even if you had in mind, doesn't make a difference. Even if you had in mind to move, your kiddush was no good. Why? Because your kiddush was not in the place of a meal, and therefore. Now he's not talking about, by the way, if you made a little meal and then you ate something and then you went and continued eating. He's talking about you made kiddush, you weren't kevei seuda, because some people might think, so if I had my brisket somewhere else, my kiddush wasn't valid. Yeah, but if you sat and you had, that's why you'll notice when people make kiddush in shul, they're careful to have like a mezainis after, to sit down and have a piece of cake, this kind of thing, so that they're kevei seuda after. But if you go from there and you go have another meal, that your kiddush is not invalid. This is talking about where you made kiddush, basically you made kiddush and you left. So your kiddush was no good, and you have to make a kiddush again before you start eating in the other place, right? Because as you know, you have to make kiddush before you eat somewhere. So therefore, you didn't make a kiddush. You're going to go eat. You have to make kiddush. Your kiddush was no good. Bein b'kiddush shalaylo, bein b'kiddush yoyim. Whether it's the night kiddush or the day kiddush. Shenamar, like it says, v'karasa la Shabbos eineg, and you should call the Shabbos eineg. You should call Shabbos pleasure. V'darshu chachamim, and the chachamim, they what is it like? Interpolated or something like this. Extirpolated. I can never remember extirpolated and interpolated. Anyway, the Chachamim were they explained on this that what does this mean? That it means that the Shabbos, right? That where is the place at Karasa Shabbos? Where is the place that you shall call Shabbos? You should call Shabbos in the place of delight, meaning in the place of the delight of the Shabbos meal. That's where the kiddush shall be read, sure, shall be called out, so to speak. Karosa. And needless to say, if one said kiddush and does not eat a meal at all, up until now we're talking about even if he. Now it's interesting. I hope there's a note on this because I struggle to understand why he needs to bring that up. Because he already said that even if you ate your meal somewhere else and you didn't eat your meal there, you weren't yaitze. So it's curious why he brings up here that if you didn't eat at all a meal after that, needless to say, you did not fulfill the obligation of kiddush. Notes.
Okay. Oh, sorry, just trying to get my laptop in the right. So notes back to earlier. So we said he's not. If he says kiddush in one house, eats in another house. So we're talking about this requirement applies not only with regard to the person making kiddush, but other people who fulfill the kiddush by listening. So it's not just the person who makes the kiddush has to be makom shudah, but also the listeners. So therefore, if kiddush is said in the shul for the public, they should also have to be some cake and the like. So the kiddush, what we said, place of a meal. Fine. Then he said, now let's get to the note that Mendel wanted to know about, because that's the next one. So it says, right? So we said we don't need to say, needless to say, if someone said kiddush and doesn't eat a meal after it, he does not fulfill his obligation for kiddush. So a person who cannot eat, for example, someone who's ill, is not obligated to the recitation of kiddush over wine. He should intend to fulfill his obligation to sanctify the Shabbos by saying it in Meir, right? Like we said in the evening service, and this is what's said in the Minchas Yitzchak. Support for this ruling can be taken from the Birkei Yosef, which says that for this reason, kiddush is not recited on Yom Kippur, even when Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos. However, basically we sanctify the Shabbos in our davening, and that's it. If, however, disabled people do not recite the evening service or do not have this intention in mind when saying that service, Tzitz Eliezer rules that someone else should say Kiddush for them over a cup of wine. Even if the person will not be eating after saying Kiddush, he may recite the bracha on behalf of this disabled person. Meaning, that wording seems to imply, meaning even someone who already made Kiddush for himself. So he's completely making the second Kiddush for the other person. The bracha is still a fine bracha. It's not a bracha levatal, even though they're not end up drinking. And in this case, one of the listeners should drink a sip of the wine, so the blessing over it will not have been in vain.
So, meaning, like, for example, like you're in a nursing home.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Ready? What's disabled have to do with anything? And what type of disablement?
Well, we're saying specifically something that disables him from drinking wine.
We're
talking about someone who is unable to drink wine.
Like in other words, like if they
or drink wine or eat a meal. Because this whole thing we're saying you have to have kiddush by a meal. And if you don't have your meal with your kiddush, that wasn't making kiddush. You didn't just make kiddush now and then you just said God's name in vain.
Wow.
So he ends off saying, so this note is talking about, well, what about a person who can't eat? For whatever reason, they're ill. They're unable, disabled, meaning literally, they're unable from having a meal. So then they're not obligated to say kiddush over wine, and instead they should do it over the davening. And he ended off by saying, technically, someone could have someone else make kiddush for them. If let's say, you have someone who's unable to. It was disabled. They are unable to have the meal, but they're also not going to be davening Ma'ariv. Maybe they don't know how to daven, or they're just not able to daven, so they're not going to sanctify the Shabbos with their davening. So he could have someone else make kiddush for him, or maybe he just forgot. Maybe he davened.
How does it help to sanctify the davening if that's also not makom suda?
Because it's the Rabbanan thing that's makom suda.
Right.
So this is all talking about
Friday
Friday night.
In other words, so in that case, I guess he can fulfill his kiddush deiraisa at least.
So that's what he's saying.
Fine. Saying, somebody who's ill, so what are you going to do? If you can't eat, you can't eat. You're ill. So at least you're saying he can fulfill his deiraisa. But what if? Wait a second. He's ill. Not only can't he eat, which is not surprising. If somebody's so ill, he mamish can't eat. It could very well be he's so ill he can't daven either.
So that's what he's saying. But it seems to be a b'diavad. He should do it in davening. But if, for whatever reason, he doesn't daven Ma'ariv,
because basically he just forgot. He's really essentially not doing the Drabanan Kiddush.
Yeah, so saying or he just forgot.
Right. He forgot to do it in my. If he did it in my, or he forgot to have in mind that he's being ate to the Kiddush then. Right. Fine, but in either of those cases, I mean, it's already a b'diavad because we're talking about somebody who's sick. In other words, if he was so sick that he can't even listen to your kiddush, then he wouldn't hear kiddush at all. In this case, if he's well enough, he can hear your kiddush and answer your kiddush. So let him. So its idea, I guess, is let him at least fulfill the from the Torah kiddush, even if he's simply unable to fulfill the Rabbanan kiddush. But at least like this, he got the Torah kiddush in. Something out there of that. Is that what it seems like?
That's what it seems. I mean,
all right, fine, good. But what does that have to do with the Ein Tzarech Leimishim Kiddush Leisad Achad of Klal? What does that have to do with anything?
I mean, because we're saying that if
he made Kiddush and he moved somewhere else that Kiddush was to eat, the Kiddush was no good. So fine. So he's basically stating something that's semi-obvious here. That's and needless to say, if you didn't eat it all, it's not good. So okay, so fine. So
then the note is commenting that there is such an example of someone who isn't going to eat anything but could still be Yetzi Kiddush. It still would need to be Yetzi Kiddush.
I get it, but why is that already not included in the ratio there? Why is that not included in the beginning? That if he moved, in other words, we could he already said Ein Kiddush El B'Makim Suda. He already said that even if you just move from one place to another before eating, it's not counted. So obviously, if you didn't eat it all, it's not counted. So in other words, I get it. There's that he's in the notes pointing out a scenario of that. And not only that, Adrab, he's saying in that case, but you actually are Yotze. But anyway, it's just a little interesting that he goes that step further to like, needless to say, if you didn't make a meal at all, but you already said Ein Kiddush El B'Makim Suda.
What's your question? Your question's on the Alter Rebbe. Why did the Alter Rebbe add this line?
Why does he add that line in the end? What Kiddush is he giving us there? That we wouldn't have understood that point already from the beginning.
Because maybe you would think that, okay, l'chatchila b'diavad you are Yotze, and he's saying no, you're not Yetzi Kiddush.
But he says lo Yotze Dechevasi even if you only moved lo Yotze Dechevasi. First he states Ein Kiddush El B'Makim Suda. There's no Kiddush besides for by a meal. Period. Then he says even if you just move from one place to another place, it's no good. And needless to say, if you ate no meal at all, it's no good. But I mean, it makes sense. It's not like he's saying something that's contradictory, but I just find it interesting that he re-stresses that again.
Yeah, I think. See, I wouldn't ask so much on the Ein Kiddush El B'Makim Suda because it's not necessarily a lashon that implies that b'diavad.
Right now he's going on and explaining.
It could be just lechatchila, but the wording later, like you said, lo yatsi dechevase b'kiddush harishon. Right. That seems
that already includes that. So I mean, I get it. He's needless to say, it's usually the Alter Rebbe doesn't. He's not. Although then again, it could be that because sometimes the Alter Rebbe generally he will use the lashon of his makar. So if his source used that lashon, that's the lashon he'll use. So maybe that's the point.
Yeah, I mean the whole source comes from the only thing that it has here is the fact that that's from Psachim Kuf Aleph. There's a little note there on that. And he has some quotes and stuff. Where this is from. I don't know if you had more time. I'd deep dive. But yeah, that's Rashi.
Ein Kiddush B'Makim Suda is from the Mechaber.
There's Beis Yosef, right?
Yeah, that's
Sefer Siman, Shulchan Aruch, Shamach Gimel, Sif Gimel. Sorry, Shin Vavayin, and Sif Gimel. Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, okay, fine. Base va'afilu b'bayis ech mecheder l'cheder, and even if within the same house, not that he moved from one to another, but in the same house from one room to another room. That he made kiddush in this room, in one room, and had in mind he's gonna eat in said room, same room.
If he makes kiddush, make kiddush in the foyer, and then let's retire to the dining room to wash.
In this case, he has in mind.
What are you talking about?
No, he has in mind to eat in the same room that he made kiddush in.
No, it doesn't say that.
Yeah,
doesn't say that.
Yeah, you'll see soon. He explains it better, but yeah, he says.
Saying,
he does say the cheder acher. He said, look, Mecheder l'cheder shekiddush b'cheder echad al das lechel b'cheder zeh. He's making kiddush in a room, and he has in mind. So this is going to be different than moving from house to house. Meaning, by house to house, it doesn't make a difference even if you have in mind. And now we'll see from a room
to room, maybe. Okay, fine.
Room to room within the same house is different. So if he is in a room and he had in mind to eat in the same room, and then he changed his mind and went to go eat in another room. So too from the what's that? From the house to the to the next level.
It's his mind.
What?
I think it's brain, like his his intent.
No, that's nimlach lechel. His intent it means he changed his mind and he went to eat. Mebais la'aliyah means like from the house to the loft floor. But whatever.
First floor, second floor, third floor, upstairs.
I think aliyah is usually means like a loft. Maybe he's saying that because of the way the houses were built into something. Maybe there weren't like floors like exactly.
The way they translated it is right, or if he says it on the first floor and then they decide to eat on the second floor, or vice versa.
But usually,
upstairs.
Fine. I mean, aliyah labayis, or from the second floor to the house. Tzarich lachzor l'kadosh. He must make kiddush again. Why? Because he had in mind to make it in this room, and now you went somewhere else and you didn't make a suda. But when are we talking about? When he changed his mind. But if when he made kiddush, he had in mind to eat in another room within the same house, if they're in one house, he doesn't have to make kiddush again if both rooms are in one house. Similarly, if he changed floors, if he had in mind. So this is different than going from house to house. By house to house, even if you had in mind, it doesn't help. Within the same house, if you had in mind, it helps. If you didn't have in mind, you have to make kiddush again. But still, in the first place, one should not do this because there are those that argue on this, on whether or not his kiddush is good. Right? There are those that hold even in the same house, even if you had in mind, no good. Right? So therefore, it's better not to do this. However, from house to house, or from a house to the courtyard, it does not help what he had in mind to do this. And like we explained in Sif Aleph, in subsection 1, if it's not within the same house, it doesn't make a difference if you had in mind. It was no good your kiddush, you have to make kiddush again. However, nevertheless, if from this place, right, wherever he is in this new house, whether he moved to the house, he moved to the courtyard, if he can see the original place he made kiddush in, even through a window, even just part of the place, part of that room, he can see part of that room in the through the window. So there are those that say that this is considered, this is fine, you can go, this is called the same place. That these two places, since you can see them, since one can see the other, is you can call is fine for kiddush. And interestingly, if you remember, we had this in Hilchos Eidos as well by witnesses. What happens if when two people they show up to a court to give testimony, they have to have witnessed this thing together, right? There can't be like I see something and you see something, but we don't see each other. So the question is, what does it mean we're together? So there's a whole discussion in Shulchan Aruch about what if we can both see the guy and we can both see each other, or what if there's a third guy who can see us both? Anyway, there's a whole. So anyways, when it comes to kiddush, this is fine that you can see the original place. just as they are considered one place with regard to making a zimun, right? When you're benching and you need 3 people to bench together to answer the zimun, right? So then you need, so this same thing, if they can see the place of each other's meal, right? These are called that they're in one place to make zimun. Like it's explained in 195, and while this is not the proper way to do it in the first place, but in pressing times when you don't have a choice, you can rely on this. But this is obviously not the best way to do it. Notes.
Okay, so back to the beginning, we said so room to room in the same house is different, but of course that's just with regards to Kiddush. You can just bring up that you can make Kiddush in one room and wash in another room, then they come back to that room and eat the meal in the same room as he recites Kiddush. Which, see, practically that's how many people.
Yeah.
Not most. It's I think better not to, but I think Lamaisa you're allowed to. So anyway,
and actually, there's if you go in many. I mean, this is less common in a place like Pittsburgh. Where not so many people like custom build their houses, and depends if you have plumbing and how easy it is to put plumbing and things like that. But you see this a lot in newer construction, in like Muncie and places like this, Borough Park, whatever, where people actually they have a sink that's within view of the of the play. Yeah, 100%.
Alrighty. So if you said Kiddush, right? So you said Mamorim. If you said Kiddush, right, you have in mind to eat in another room in the same house. So we're talking about 2 apartments in the same building are considered as separate dwellings. By contrast, many rooms in the common domain, meaning separate rooms in a hospital, are considered as different rooms in one home. So that's different. Yeah. Down. So we said we're talking about you're moving from a house to a courtyard, kind of chutzner courtyard. We're talking about like Talmudic time courtyard, when you have a shared courtyard, you have a courtyard shared with others, or basically one that is not enclosed. Because if it's enclosed, then it's part of the house. It wouldn't be a separate rishus. When we're saying courtyard in regards to house, by the chutzner, we're talking about a chutzner that's open or it's shared, and we'll see this later. Okay, and then. So it's required to say Kiddush again, as we explained above. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. Then, so even if you can see through a window, so that's based on 178 and 195, it can be concluded this leniency does not apply when a public domain separates between 2 places, the Badei Shulchan points out. So just because you can see it, the fact is that this Rishus HaRabim in between that separates them. It's too wide of a gap, so to speak. And it says even if But if there's not a Rishus HaRabim, and even if you only see a portion of his place, you don't see the whole space. It's not totally open. So the Badei Shulchan states that one must be able to see the area within 4 cubits of the space where he recited Kiddush. Seeing another portion of the room is not sufficient. You need to be able to see within Daled Amos of where you make Kiddush. So now these 2 places are considered as one place with regards to Kiddush. So that's it. Okay.
Okay, and now Gimel. Mi pino lepino babayis echad, from corner to corner in one house. Shekiddush bezovis zu, that he made kiddush in this corner. Al das lechol kan, and he had in mind he's going to eat in that corner that he's making kiddush in. And then he changed his mind to go eat in a different corner. Same house, same room. Even if it is a big hall, right? Like let's say in a shul, for example, is a good example, right? Or if you're in the big Ali Torah hall, right? And you're making one corner, you make kiddush, and then you change your mind to go into a room. Do not have to make Kiddush again. That the entire room is considered one place. So it's all. So that's called Mekay Masuda. You make Kiddushin. Some don't agree. There are opinions that say no, and therefore, even though Alter Rebbe in principle doesn't hold by those opinions, but since there are such opinions, it's better when possible. Like, and then, for example, and you'll see this in shul, that and it's kedai to be careful of this. Is people, they make sure that, let's say, for example, sometimes you go like someone like me who's loud, right? So they'll ask, can you make kiddush by the women's section so that people could hear, right? So but I'm not eating there. I have a plate somewhere else. So you make sure to bring with you a mezainis, crackers, something, right? And then you make kiddush, and then you have the akazayis right there, so that you had suppose b'makom seuda, and then you go on to your other place further down in the room to eat. So that way you satisfied this other opinion. Notes.
Okay, so you don't have to make kiddush again based on 178. One is considered to be eating in the same place, even though he cannot see the place in that room where he recited kiddush. But nevertheless, the chatchila shouldn't do so. As to Tehillah David says that this chumrah applies only when one changed his mind and moved to another place in the room. However, when you make kiddush, let's say, so your example, if they ask you to make kiddush by women's side, you're having in mind, I'm going to have my meal over there. So that's not a problem then to eat over there. So we're just talking about the Tehillah David is just saying we're only talking about that you didn't have it in mind. So
what if you make kiddush like I in the past? I go, let's see, I was at the Cohen's house to make kiddush, but I already knew I was just going there for kiddush for whatever reason, and then I was going to go to AC Darren's for the meal and bench. So I go to the Cohen's for kiddush, and I'd have in mind knowing I'm going to be benching.
So it's
wait a minute, let me take it back. I made kiddush at the Cohen's, for example. Then I'm pretty sure, I think I washed at the Cohen's, okay? And then I would go to the Darren's so
your kiddush was for sure fine, because right. You washed, you ate bread.
Right.
That's a seuda. You just made a seuda. You're 100%. As far as kiddush goes, you're 100%.
Did I have to bench at the Cohen's?
So that's a different story. That's a whole different.
Why wouldn't I? Would go within mine. I already knew where I was going, and I was going to bench there.
That's a whole different Siman.
Okay.
So, but right now we're talking about your kiddush.
Right. Oh, okay.
Okay, your kiddush was a valid kiddush because you washed there and you had a meal there.
Well, got you.
Right here, we're only talking about if your kiddush.
I'm taking it too far.
It's a very good question, but we're not holding.
What you're asking is about benching. Yeah,
he's asking about the benching, and then by the way, there also this same thing comes into play about did you have in mind or not. But for the sake of continuing here, we'll continue with kiddush. And when we get to the laws of Birchas Hamazon, we'll
many times the Lubavitch Center would make kiddush, and then the next thing you know, we're like on the other side. We end up having the meal on the other side of the shul. So I was told it's best to go back to your seats where you made the kiddush to bench. I think so. I would try, but sometimes you're not.
That's correct.
And you bench on the other side of the shul. But I was told by I forget who that it's better to go back to where you
right.
sat.
So it's if it's in the same room, right? So it's correct. It's better if you go to the same place that you made the. But the truth is that it's right. If you made hamaitzi, it's better to go. However, it's not an invalid benching if you didn't mamish sit in that.
Okay.
But that's a whole discussion.
That's a whole other one. Sorry.
That's a discussion about Birchas Hamazon.
I'm opening up a lot of words.
Your kiddush, there is no question. Your kiddush was good, and also when you went Cohen and you washed there, your kiddush there was good. There was no problem with your kiddush there.
It would have been the Markels, but I never got an invitation there yet. For the last 25 years.
Yeah, me neither. It's curious, isn't it?
Yep. Those people don't invite.
I'm pulling your chain. Oh, this is live. Sorry.
It's okay. It's a good thing you said chain. All right. Okay. And were we holding? We did the notes?
Yeah, we were just still doing 3. I know. We just finished 3 so far. We're up to Daled.
4. A sukkah which is in the house. It's inside the house.
Meaning those removable roofs.
Right. So, like for example, they have the houses that where the roof, a big skylight opens up, and they put schach on there or whatever. So it's in the house now. I'm guessing in the times of the Rebbe, perhaps the roof moving technology was not quite there. But in either case, it could be there were houses. For example, I mean, I don't know. In Russia, it's so common, but in places like Mexico, right, where the weather is more balmy than places like Russia, there actually are houses that have parts of the house are kind of like open roof and parts are covered, and it's not really a courtyard because it's a thing. You go mamish from the house into this room. It just doesn't happen to not have a roof. Now, it wouldn't be chayiv mezuzah, right? Because it doesn't have a roof. But it's still it's up in the house.
Question.
That's what I'm imagining because I'm trying to picture a place in Russia that has. I mean, the only places in Russia that have a removable roof. It's not removable. It's. I know people in Russia who don't have a roof.
Mendel. No one said it's a roll-up roof. The guy just removes his roof. Right. That's a cheap roof. It's easier.
He figured. You know what? I don't have a roof anyway. I might as well make a sukkah in here.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
2 things. Excuse me. A sukkah is supposed to be a temporary dwelling. So how could you have the sukkah even if the roof comes off of the house? The walls and the whole.
That is an excellent question, which we will discuss in the Siman that relate to sukkah.
I mean, that's the thing about it, because you're walking into the sukkah from inside the house, and it's not a temporary dwelling.
You're correct. There's all kinds of questions and how that can be done, and what's the proper way it has to be done, and we will discuss that in Hilchos Sukkah.
So wait a minute. So the Rabbi Jacobowitz, who used to be the principal at Hillel. Never heard of Rabbi Jacobowitz?
No.
In the 60s.
No wonder I didn't hear
He was my neighbor behind me. And he built he had a tool shed, and he had a slanted roof on it, kind of slightly, with a hinge, and he had a rope going up the side of his house with pulleys. And so this time, that tool shed, he pulled the rope and it opened up the roof.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have to have similar things like this.
It's still there. My friend lives in that house. I have to show you sometime. It's amazing. With the tool shed, it turns into
there's certain ways that has to be done. But anyway, we'll discuss that in Hilchos Sukkah. Now we'll continue with Shabbos. This is as relates to Shabbos. In terms of if it's a kosher sukkah or not, we're not worried about this moment.
Okay, right.
So a sukkah that's in a house. Right? Even though he doesn't call them walls really. He calls them like a mechitza is like a separator. How do you call it? Like
partition.
Partition, yeah. So even though I guess we'll see for what the significance is that he's calling it the partitions and not the walls. But even though the partitions of the sukkah, they make what do you call it? They make an interruption. They interrupt between the space of the sukkah and the space of the house. It's not considered its own room. Why? Being that the only reason you have these partitions up is because you require them so that your sukkah should be kosher. Other than that, what do you need the walls up there for? The sukkah is in the house. So you don't need it to protect you from wind or from anything else. You need the partition because you have to have 10 tefachim of sukkah. So therefore, being that it's the purpose of those partitions is only for that. Let's jump back up to the other one. If he made kiddush in the house, and afterwards he changed his mind, perhaps because now in Chabad, this by the way would be a less common scenario, but because in Chabad we eat in the rain. But let's say it was raining when he made kiddush, so he sat down to make kiddush in the house, and then it stopped raining. What happens if it stops raining? If it stops raining, now you have to go in the sukkah. So then he goes into the sukkah. Or the other way around. Let's say he was eating in the sukkah and it started pouring. So again, in Chabad we don't have this problem. So it started pouring. You keep eating, you keep verbranking, right? However, in most of the world, if it's raining, then not only are you not required to eat in the sukkah at that point, some would say it's better not to, because the joy of the meal and whatever, and it's not a way. You're not enjoying the Yom Tov meal. In either case, there's someone whose minhag is to go in the rain. So let's say it's the other way around. He made kiddush in the sukkah and it started raining, and now he's going to finish the meal in the house. Now again, remember, this is talking about he just made kiddush. It's not talking about in the middle of the meal it started raining. Once he sat down and started his meal there, again, how it's going to work for Birchas HaMazon, whole different story. In terms of how it's going to work for it, was your kiddush valid? So we're not talking about you started eating, because once you sat down and ate a kazayis in there, you already had a suda in that place. You're good. This is talking about in between. You just finished kiddush, and then it started raining. So now you're going to go out of the sukkah to have the suda, or vice versa. You made kiddush in the house. No, it stopped raining. Let's go outside and eat. You do not have to make kiddush again. This is like from corner to corner within the same room, meaning that the walls of the sukkah don't the walls of the sukkah don't change that, being that they're only there for the sukkah. However, if there are partitions of the house, meaning there's walls in the house that interrupt bein chalal habayis to chalal sukkah. For example, let's say you didn't put up sukkah walls. Let's say your house is already configured in such a way that there's wall for the sukkah, that there's enough wall for sukkah, that there's already walls there, your house walls. So if there's house walls, you can use that for sukkah walls. You don't have to put up another sukkah wall. So now, but here's the problem: is now this wall, it's not like a sukkah wall that its only purpose is because you need it for a kosher sukkah. It actually has a purpose as a wall house also. So even though there's a door, an opening from the house that's going into the sukkah, so now the rule changes and it becomes like room to room in the same house. Which, like we said before, right? What's the difference? If it's in the same room, even in a giant room, even if you didn't have in mind to move, you're still good. So in this case, where the house walls are the walls of the sukkah, then it's considered like two rooms. And then if you had in mind in the first place to go from here to there, then you're fine. If you didn't have in mind, you have to make kiddush again. Now, if the sukkah is not close to the house, but rather it's close to the air of the courtyard. But the air of the courtyard is between them. Meaning, as opposed to let's say a patio, right? So the second scenario that we just said, where the walls of the house separate between the sukkah, that it's mecheder l'cheder. So let's say you have your sukkah is against your house, right? You have like the famous Munich Berlin deck, right? You have this enclosed this deck, which by the way his deck is a room. It has 10 tefachim of walls already also. But in this case, you have between the house and the sukkah, you have a wall separating. So
you say Rabbi minutes. You just
yeah,
say Rabbi.
You remember his sukkah?
I don't remember.
Here's the Lynn's deck.
Yeah. Okay.
So on that deck, he has even though he puts up walls, tarps and stuff, right, for the walls.
Right.
But technically, you don't even have to because he has a railing that goes around the whole thing that's over 10 tefachim. Okay, so that's like attached to the house. But now, so that's the sukkah is there. But now you have a wall. There's a wall in between the house and the sukkah, and it's a house wall. So it's not considered in the same room. That would be considered like our second scenario from room to room, like two rooms in the same house. Now, however, what if you don't even? It's not even attached. What if it's like? Like I have it in my house, or many people have, where I have you go out of the house, and then I have a front yard with a patio on it, and the sukkah is on there, and it's separated from the house. There's space in between the house and the sukkah.
You have a patio in your front yard?
Yeah.
I know you got a couple of grills. I've seen that.
Yeah. So there's air in between them. So harizeh can be bias the bias and be bias the chatzer. So this is considered like it's a separate house, meaning, like we said before. So here's the three scenarios. If the sukkah is mamish in the house and there's no walls separating it, besides for the sukkah walls, these walls only function as sukkah walls. They're not your house walls. They're walls that you put up so that it's a kosher sukkah. That's considered one big room. And if you move from inside that sukkah to outside of the sukkah into the room, it's like one room, and it's okay whether you had in mind, whether you didn't have in mind. Scenario 2 is it's attached to the house, it's part of the house, but there's a wall in between. And this wall is part of the house wall. Now it's not the wall that's only for a sukkah. This wall also functions as a house wall when it's not being a sukkah, meaning the rest of the year. It's a wall. In that case, it's like going from room to room, in which case, if you had in mind to move, you're fine. If you didn't have in mind, you're not fine. The third case is if your sukkah is disconnected from your house, then it doesn't help even if you had it in mind, unless you can see from your sukkah the place that you made kiddush. So that's the three scenarios of a sukkah. Most obviously, sukkahs will probably will be either like scenario 2 or scenario 3, and a few will be like scenario 1, also, if they have a removable roof. Notes.
So yeah, hold on a second. Here we go. So yeah, so if he changes his mind, like you said, because of the rain or the cold, thought to eat in one place, change your mind, he decides to eat in the other. Then when he says, the walls of the house separate between the space of the home and the space of the sukkah, meaning even if it shares it's made outside of the house, but shares a common wall with the house, like you said. So it's attached. But it's not in the house, but it's attached to the house, right? It's sharing a common wall. And then we finished off at the end. They put a note, basically, the laws of Sifim 1 and 2 would apply. And in 178, the Alter Rebbe rules that if an orchard is enclosed by a fence, moving from place to place is considered as moving from room to room. Thus, if a sukkah is constructed in a private courtyard surrounded by a wall which also surrounds the house, going from the house to the sukkah is considered going from room to room. Remember, it's all Rosh Hashanah, which is why it's also not a problem to carry in such a case. In the sukkah, the house. It's not like going from one dwelling to another. It's like going from room to room. So again, when we say bayis lachatzer, we're talking about not enclosed chatzer, because if it's enclosed, it's just like it's inside the house. It's one big house, and the borders of the house is the fence and the Rosh Hashanah. Which lamaisa, when we have a community eruv, that even if we don't rely on it, let's say even those for those who wouldn't rely on it, but still it's good Rosh Hashanah. It goes to say that for these halachas also it makes a difference. Meaning if I decide to have an outdoor kiddush for whatever reason, I'm not going from outside of my house to inside of my house. It's going from room to room.
Right.
I was to Shmuel Weinstein's years ago, and I forget for what reason. I guess he wanted to extend and make an arrow from the back porch of his house on Wallingford, and we took some type of string and actually made a little bit of an arrow for himself in his own backyard. For whatever reason, I guess he was having an extra piece. I can't remember why, but it just came in my head.
Well, the expanded area of the expansion that includes even his house is more recent. It was a couple of years ago. Hospitals and everything. That was only 4 years ago.
The expansion of the community, or is what you're saying? Yeah.
So I'm saying is my in-laws were not even in the community area up until a couple of years ago.
No. Okay. I realized, so that's what I'm saying. Was he able to? Apparently, he must maybe to take a string from his back porch and make an arrow for your case.
He made his own Eruv. Yeah,
you're allowed to do that.
You absolutely have to make your own Eruv. It's got to be halachically correct. I don't understand what the question.
There was no question.
Asking, are you allowed to make your own Eruv?
Initially it wasn't a question. I just wanted to share the experience of what I saw him do for, I can't remember the reason now, but he had a reason he was telling me why he was doing it. And I remember vividly when he did it that time, back in the early times.
In the old times.
Sif, hey.
You must eat in the place of Kiddush. Not only must you eat in the place of Kiddush, but you must do so immediately after Kiddush. If he didn't eat there until after time, and how much time that'll be, we're not talking about yet, but he did not fulfill his obligation. And he has to make Kiddush again before he eats. And there's no difference between a small time and a long time. Obviously, there'll be a little bit of a difference between a very small time and a small time. But Medvar Mamurim, when is this speaking? When he made Kiddush, he did not have in mind to eat right away. Right? So this is a problem. Then, meaning, when are we saying that he did not fulfill his obligation? When he paused in between. This is when he did not have in mind. But if he had in mind, he was intending on eating immediately. Right? But something happened to him, it means he was forced. Something happened. Something came up that forced him. And he didn't eat till after time. Then he did fulfill his obligation. And when he goes and eats in the same, and obviously he still has to eat, whatever it was. You made Kiddush, and God forbid, like sometimes happen, the baby bumped his head on the wall, and now you go check on the baby. Baruch Hashem, thank God the baby's okay, because the Eibishter was watching out for your baby. But in the meantime, you didn't start eating right away. So now you go back, obviously, to the same place where you were. You can't now change places. You go back to where you were, meaning according to all the rules above, in terms of what we call the place of Kiddush. And you're good. You don't have to make Kiddush again. But that's if he did not go out from this place between when he made Kiddush and the 8. But if he walked out, so let's say you were now the question is, what does he mean by this place? But anyways, let's just assume it was next door. Let's just give the most extreme version. Is he was in the house and he made Kiddush, and the kid walks in and says, Tati, the baby bumped his head next door by the neighbors. Or maybe you were making Kiddush by the neighbor. and Tati, the next door by our house. So now you went out from the place to another place, and you came back into the original place, now you have to make Kiddush again because you left that place and came back. But if in the first place he had in mind not to eat after a time, even if he had in mind not to eat here, but he'll eat somewhere else. Now, right, which we know you can't do that. Right? As we said before, both of those things you cannot do. You cannot, if you make Kiddush and you have in mind to eat this Uda somewhere else and you go somewhere else, your Suda was no good.
Hear me.
Furthermore, if you have in mind to go, if you have in mind to not eat till later and you eat later, your Kiddush was no good. However, we're saying you had in mind to do something the wrong way, but then you ended up changing your mind and eating right there, right now. Despite the fact that you had in mind to go change places, etc., your Kiddush now is good since you ate your once you change your mind and you sit down right away and have the meal. Notes.
All right, so there's one big note right at the top. So basically, right, so we're saying you have to Kiddush. By the way, before we get to the note, it's not a mashal, I think, sorry, not a mashal, example, I think it's very important, just as a disclaimer, with regards to when we're in hotels. We have Shabbatons in hotels. Now, that also brings up another thing with regards to Erevin, but just to touch on, with the whole thing of carrying. So most Rabbanan Paskin, I think, Lamaisa, it's fine because you're renting the rooms that you're in, so the hallways and public spaces become like kind of shared space, so you're allowed to carry between those things. I remember hearing that the Frierdiker Rebbe, though, still customarily would make a deal with the manager and give $1 to kind of like privately rent even the hallway space and the lobby space or whatever. Because, and I would say, I wonder though, because that would make a huge difference because the Kiddush, there you are making Kiddush, let's say in the hall where everyone's doing the Shabbaton, and you realize the challahs were not brought into that room. Even to go across the hall into the side storeroom or the other kitchen, you just left the room. And if you walk through the hallway, if that's not Rishus HaYachid, if you didn't do that deal where you gave the $1, then you have to make Kiddush again. So I wonder, I don't know. I have to get into Erevin a little more, and in that case, the hotel, but to find out, do you have to make Kiddush? Because it would seem that's public space. You're in an apartment building, Crown Heights. The hallway, it's shared use space, but it's not private property. You have your neighbor across the way. Oh, I don't have any challahs. Let's go across the way. You have to have some sort of makom suda before you leave the room. Right. So it's very contextual. So in the Kuntres Achron, so there was a note, big bays. So it brings up that in the Kuntres Achron to section 263, the Alter Rebbe defines the term la'alter. So we write that he has to make Kiddush immediately, la'alter. Translated here is directly after, as referring to an interval that is, quote, significantly less than 15 minutes, end quote, which is approximately 10 minutes according to the Badei Shulchan. In our context, there are authorities like the Badei Shulchan who allow up to an interval equivalent to bichidei achilas pras, the amount of eating pras, like a dough ball or something, which is 4 to 9 minutes. And others, Eshel Avram of Buchach, who permit up to a 72-minute interval, like you brought up before, which is a huge difference between 4 to 9 minutes and 72 minutes. Badei HaShulchan and the Mishnah Brura emphasize that this restriction does not apply when the interruption is made for the purpose of the meal. As support, Badei HaShulchan notes that at the Pesach Seder, an extended interruption is made between Kiddush and the meal. So it could be hours before, especially on the second night in the Labavitch meal, it could be hours and hours before you eat the meal. That's all for the meal.
Even on a Shabbos, fine, not 72 minutes or whatever, but on a Shabbos, right? When if you have a lot of guests and everybody has to wash, etc., right. It takes it's not immediately. It takes some time there.
I was going to say, especially let's say for example, not a regular Shabbos. We just talk about sukkahs. Everyone has to file out of the sukkah, go into the house, usually, wash inside. It's usually a lot more, it's not so easy for everyone to move rooms, sit back in their seats. Sometimes it's a little cramped in the sukkah, etc. So, it's not such a simple thing. Yeah, absolutely. And that was it. Vav.
Vav yachol adam lekadish lacherim afal pisha ena eichli mahem. A person can make kiddush for others even though he's not eating with them. Ve'ein bazeh mishum kiddush leib mekim suda, and it's not and it's not a problem of eating not in the place of the suda, meaning for him it is. If that can't be his kiddush, but for them, the people who are listening, it's not a problem. Because the people listening, you actually there on the lines of what you brought up before. The people who are listening, and they're being yaitzi from his kiddush, that's their kiddush, and then they're eating the meal. So for them, that's the place of the meal. Still, since he is not fulfilling his obligation with his kiddush, and so too, he already made kiddush in the place of his misuda, right? Like the example would be, let's say in a shul, I made kiddush with my mezainis, and they say there's women just came in who didn't hear kiddush. Can you make kiddush again? Okay, so you're making it for them, right? So kevan shehu ain't tzarich l'kiddush zeh, ein loy l'kadish la'achin l'chatchila. So since he does not require this kiddush, so in the first place, it's better he doesn't make kiddush for others. Unless they can't make kiddush for themselves. However, if he did not make kiddush for himself, so now here's the thing. So there's two things we're talking about. One is you need to make kiddush for other people. You yourself, you did not make kiddush yet, and you're not intending to have your suda now. You're gonna make kiddush later and make with a suda, but they need a kiddush, and they don't know how to make a kiddush. So you make kiddush for them. Okay, so and the other scenario was you already made kiddush. Now you're going to make kiddush for them. So now, if you didn't make kiddush yet yourself, you're going to make later. You're not. This is not going to be your kiddush. Your kiddush you're going to make later. And you're just making it for them. You have to be careful not to drink from the cup of kiddush. Because you're not supposed to drink the wine if you're not making the kiddush in the place of your meal. You can still make the hagafen in this kiddush because you're making the hagafen for them. It's not a bracha levatala because you're making the bracha for them to be yaitza from, so they can drink. So obviously, what's going to happen here is you make the kiddush, you make the hagafen, and then one of the people, ideally all of them have a taste. But if you remember, like we said before, it's important that at least one of them has melei lugma, that drinks the cheekful. Ideally, a revius, that for sure is important. That one person has that, and ideally that even everybody has a taste, like we said before. Even though by generally speaking, by birchas hanenin, meaning when you're making a bracha for something that you have benefits from, right? Like I can't be. If you want to eat a cookie, I can't make the mezainis and you answer amen. You need to make the bracha yourself. Usually by birchas hanenin. However, this is different because this beir pi hagafen of kiddush, bein shel laila, bein shel yom, whether at night and day, v'chein birchas hamaitzi shemekadosh al pas, as well as the hamaitzi on the bread, einin daimis l'shar birchas hanenin. It's not the same as other brachas that you're having for something you're going to benefit. Hayil v'hein chayva, because they're an obligation. Meaning, if you want a cookie, you have to make the bracha. I can't be yotzi with my bracha mezainis. But you know what? You also have no obligation to eat a cookie. There is no obligation to eat. I know it's nice to eat a cookie. There's no obligation to eat a cookie. So therefore, So it stands that way. However, by these things, being that you're doing it in order to fulfill somebody's obligation of a Torah thing, in that case, you're allowed to do it. Commission is bad with Siman Kuf Samar Zion, like explained in 167 notes.
Now, so first of all, lacherim, they bring up even children because we're obligated to train them in the observance of mitzvahs. So you're allowed to make kiddush for kindlech, even though you don't end up eating with them. So for Tzivas Hashem things or whatever, yeah, keep that in mind. So now that we said,
Well,
so even if they don't know how to,
it's the same, by the way, as the Kiddush Shel Yain. In other words, it's interesting because that makes it clear why he mentions Kiddush Shel Yain and Kiddush Shel Laila, the night Kiddush and the day Kiddush. Because you would think only the Torah obligation one. No, even if somebody has a rabbinical obligation, right? Because only men and women who are over bar and bas mitzvah have a Torah obligation, and only by night.
Right.
By day, everybody is a rabbinical obligation, and children are always a rabbinical obligation. So, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So, then we said you should not say kiddush for others unless they know how to, unless they do not know how to recite it themselves. So, if they don't know how to recite kiddush, even if they do know how to say the bracha ber per gafen, the other person is allowed to say ber per gafen as well. Excuse me. Moreover, in the present situation, a person who does not eat with them may recite Kiddush on their behalf, even if they know how to recite the blessing of Kiddush. So then we went on. I said, although he's not drinking, he can nevertheless say Bar Gafen at this Kiddush for the listeners. He should recite the bracha Bar Gafen only when one or more of the listeners will partake of the wine. Otherwise, you should say Kiddush over bread. And then the last one, yeah. So nevertheless, the Bar Gafen of Kiddush, whether it's night or day, and the bracha hamaitzi, when one says Kiddush on bread, do not resemble other brachas hanenin. But the note adds, but he may not, however, say the bracha hamaitzi on their behalf if he said Kiddush on wine. And we'll see the explanation, 167, and we'll actually quote it in a second. Okay, so now here's a nice big long note on this. Okay, so over there in 167, the Alter Rebbe explains. A person who's not eating may not say the bracha hamaitzi in order to fulfill the obligation of others who are eating. I can't go say hamaitzi on making kiddush hamaitzi on other just because they're eating. I'm not eating, and this ruling applies even if those individuals do not know how to say the bracha themselves. The rationale is that since he's not eating, he's not obligated in this bracha, like you said, the cookie thing, and one who is not obligated in a matter cannot fulfill the obligation on behalf of others. In this, the brachas recited in appreciation of receiving benefit, i.e., known as birchas hane'enin, do not resemble the brachas made over mitzvahs, birchas ha-mitzvahs. In the latter instance, one who's no longer obligated in the mitzvah because he already fulfilled his obligation can say a bracha for another person who has not yet fulfilled his obligation. Meaning for birchas ha-mitzvahs, sure, I can say the bracha again, so you can fulfill your mitzvah, and you still know how to say the bracha. So you can say kiddush, Shabbos Yom Tov for women, unlearned people. The rationale is that all of Yisrael are responsible for each other, call it with regards to mitzvahs that are obligatory. Hence, even a person who fulfilled his personal obligation is still considered as obligated in the matter. His fellow Yid has yet to fulfill his obligation. Like the Rebbe spoke very strongly about. We closed the Sfarim on Friday to go on Mitzvayim because my tefillin is lacking because there's a Yid out there who's not putting on tefillin. So, with regards to Birchas Hane'enin, by contrast, even though they're obligatory for those who derive benefit, just because I'm enjoying the steak doesn't mean I have the option. Basically, it doesn't mean it's for someone else. I have the option of just not eating the steak, not deriving benefits, and if I'm not deriving benefits, then I won't recite the said bracha. So another person who does not personally derive benefit is not considered as obligated in the recitation of the bracha, but the first person must recite on the food from which he seeks to derive benefit. Different laws apply concerning the blessings recited over all eating and drinking that are obligatory, independent of the benefit the person derives. For example, the bracha over the matzah on the first night of Pesach and over the wine for Kiddush, whether at night or during the day on Shabbos and Yom Tov. In these instances, if a person does not know how to say the bracha, another person who has already fulfilled his obligation may say the bracha, enabling the unlearned person to fulfill his obligation. This includes also any one of the brachas hane'enin associated with the mitzvah, meaning hamaitzi for the matzah, ber gafen for the wine. If the unlearned person desires to make Kiddush over bread rather than wine, doesn't know the bracha hamaitzi, the learned person could say the bracha hamaitzi in the Kiddush, fulfilling the unlearned person's obligation. In this instance, bracha hamaitzi is recited as part of the obligation of Kiddush, not to enable the unlearned person to derive benefit, though, so can't be doing it. Zion.
Hayru hagainim. Yeah, here we go. Hayru hagainim shezesh amru chachamim ein kiddush al magim seuda ein tzarich sheyigmer sham kol seudasei. So this is a very important thing. This part of it, because we went through all these situations of not being able to leave the Suda and having to making sure to start the Suda right away, right? Which seems like a daunting thing, but no, it isn't. And we'll see this is why people do what they do. That the Geonim ruled that the Chacham said that Kiddush is only in the place of the meal. It doesn't mean he has to finish the entire meal. As long as he ate one kizayis, one olive-sized portion, which probably the notes will touch on how much that is. Right, or not even bread, but even a kizayis over one of the 5 types, meaning a right, a piece of cake, a cookie, etc., a cracker. Or he drank, or alternatively, right, because there are 2 important brachas besides your hamaitzi, that are brachas of chashivus, which are mezainis and hagafen. So alternatively, if you drink a revius of wine, milvad kais kiddush, besides the cup of kiddush, yaitz bazek kiddush b'makim seuda. So you fulfilled the obligation of your meal. You can eat the meal after this in a different place. Bein miyad, whether immediately, bein lachazman, or after time. And he does not have to make a bracha on the cup before that seuda, meaning he does not have to make another kiddush before that seuda that he's going to have later. Bein balayla, bein bayayim, both the night and as well as the day. Kiven shekvar yatzei day kiddush magim seuda. He already fulfilled his obligation in the place of a meal for kiddush. He fulfilled it. So this other meal, it's like the third meal of Shabbos. That you don't have to make a bracha you don't have to make kiddush on a cup before it, because you already made kiddush. So now you can go have 3 meals in different places, right? So for example, at night you make kiddush, you ate, now you're going to a shalom zachi. You don't have to make kiddush in the place of the shalom zachi. You already had yisuda. So anyway, this is why we see people are machbid, and it is worthwhile doing so. Of when you make kiddush, so for example in shul, to bring and this is why you also see the people not just make a mezainis after, but they make sure that when they're saying kiddush, they have a mezainis right there to make the hagafen on. I mean, to make the one that they're going to make kiddush on by there, and that they make kiddush, and right away they eat a kazayis of mezainis, of cracker, cake, cookie, whatever it is, something that's mezainis. Now, if you do not have cookies available, which is the usual way that people do it, you do have another alternative, and I believe Yehuda Leib brought this up because there was the case where you had to go and make kiddush by someone's house, and there was no mezainis that you could rely on as necessarily being 100% kosher, and what you did in that case was you drank a second revius, like the Rebbe says here, that your kiddush is valid also if you have an additional revius of wine at that place. That the first revius you drank was for kiddush. The second revius is for the purpose of the meal. Notes.
So the measurements. According to Shirei Torah, an olive-sized portion has a volume of 28.8 cc, which is slightly over 1 fluid ounces in contemporary measure. It must be emphasized, however, that this measure is a measure of volume, not a measure of weight. Moreover, later in Tuf Pei Vav 486, based on Uktzin, the Alter Rebbe writes that this measure should be calculated without crushing the small air pockets within the food. When measuring foods or liquids that have similar consistency as water, specific density of 1, the food's weight can be used to measure its volume. thus 28.8 grams of weight, would take up a volume of 28.8 cc, the size of one olive-sized portion. So, excuse me. The specific density of bread, cake, and crackers ranges from 0.5 to 0.75, and even less when there are air pockets. For example, an olive-sized portion of matzah or crackers will weigh 14.4 grams, which actually you'll also see the difference between different types of matzah when you're talking about oat versus, regular whole wheat or wheat, or spelt. Yeah, it's different,
They're right.
Spelt and the wheat and the whole wheat tend to be similar, but oat is like so much more dense. It's so much, Yeah. So now the Badi Shulchan states this amount of bread should be eaten with bichdei achilas pras, time that it takes to eat half a loaf of bread made of grain. So in section 612, the Alter Rebbe explains that this measure of time is the subject of a difference of opinion amongst the rabbis. More recent authorities mention varying opinions as to this measure, ranging from as brief as 3 minutes until as long as 9 minutes. See Sefer HaMinhagim, which again, also Pesach comes up, how quick to be eating your matzah. I think we average it out at about 7 minutes, but yeah, between 3 and 7 minutes. Based on Shira Torah, the accepted Lubavitch practice is considered b'chdei achilas pras as 4 minutes with regards to the obligation to eat the required amount of matzah on Pesach, but a full 9 minutes with regards to liability of eating a koseves, which is a date-sized portion on Yom Kippur. So, which again, when a Rav, let's say, sometimes will tell someone, okay, you can eat, but make sure you're eating less than a koseves within 9 minutes, only smaller amounts, so that way you're not, trying to minimize what you're transgressing.
Yeah, and now you know why people spend extra money on Montreal matzah for the Sidorim, because when you have a matzah that's crispy and thin and fresh and etc., it's easier to eat the sheer matzah because you have to eat the sheer matzah within a set time, and it's a lot easier to do so when you're not, when your matzah doesn't go nyang 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 nyang. Anyway,
all right. So then, so that was just the one big thing on measurements. There was one other. I mean, they also said the revius is about what's something else, which we already know, 86 cc, 2.9 for an ounce. But here, okay. So he says, besides for the cup of wine on which the kiddush is recited, right? It's got to be an additional revius, as we're going to see into Seifim. The second revius is required because the wine is taking place of the bread. Hence, just as one must eat an olive-sized portion of bread in addition to the wine we drink for kiddush, he must drink a second revius of wine. That's the machzas shekel to the Magen Avraham. So, Magen Avraham. So, definitely important to keep that up. And then afterwards, whether immediately thereafter or time later, you can have part of a meal later. So, as we see in 249, we saw in Reish Nun, or some people saw in Reish Nun, states that it is a mitzvah not to eat anything else before one partakes of his Shabbos meal, so he'll partake of the meal with an appetite. Nevertheless, it's widespread considered custom to recite Kiddush and hold brotherly farbrengans after davening and partake of one's meal afterwards. So we were saying we sit down for a meal versus having a technically makim suda meal is what he's talking about. Okay, and then we ended off. Right, so since you already fulfilled the kiddush in place of meal, this meal is more similar to the shalosh sudas, the third Shabbos meal, and you don't have to make you don't make on a kiddush. Okay, so we'll see later. Reish Tzadikav, fine, ches.
However, if he did not have bread or mezainis, or meaning other grain foods that they're not bread but they're mezainis, or wine, even if he had a beverage which is chamar medina, like we mentioned before, that we talked about what you can be yotze kiddush on and what you're not yotze kiddush on. So these things, even though it's chamar medina and it's an important thing, that's for kiddush itself. But so if you had a cup of wine for kiddush, now you have another cup of wine for the seuda, you're fine. But if you made kiddush on beer or one of the other things, again we'll refer to above the things that you can make kiddush and when you can make kiddush on them, etc., etc. But you cannot then go and have another revius of this for your seuda like you can with wine. Why? Because wine satisfies the heart. V'chameshes haminim ikrayim mazin, and the 5 grains are called sustenance, meaning they are things which give sustenance. And therefore it is fitting to call them in the name of a seuda, which actually you'll notice that seuda has the same shayrish, the same root as sayed. Like we said, sayed Leib, it satisfies the heart. So that's the same shayrish as seuda. Masha'en kain b'sha'ar mashkma pedis, where on the other hand, other fruits and drinks and things, they do not share these qualities that wine and mezainis have. So you cannot make the meal on those things. Notes.
So we said the wine satiates the heart. It comes from brachas. Say the rechaz anenin. And in that source, the Alter Rebbe states that dates also satiate the heart, but nevertheless, he does not mention the option of having dates for sustaining food like mazing. That's just an interesting point. Tess.
Some say that even if he drank a revius of wine from the cup of kiddush, which is interesting because he just said that meaning as opposed to a different so if you drink wine, a revius of wine from the cup of kiddush, you were meaning. Now this is what's interesting again. Nowadays, generally, we try to be careful to anyways drink a revius with wine. But technically, unless you're a very, very large man, you don't need to, and you have big, actually you can be a tiny man with big cheeks. But if you have big cheeks, then it might be a revius. But let's say your malay lugma, you're full of cheeks, is only half a revius, which like we said, that the minimum that you should, meaning ideally you should try to drink a whole revius, being that who's to say who has bigger cheeks or smaller cheeks. But we said that at minimum you should really just you go by feel, but also at the minimum you should drink most of a revius, right? So let's say you drank a revius from the cup of kiddush, like you spell like the ideal way of malugmav. That's already called that you had it in the place of the meal. And when did they require a seuda in the place of kiddush? When you only drank the most of a revius, right? The lower count of the average person's malay lugmav, right? But as opposed to drinking the whole revius. And when it's a pressing time, you can rely on this. Again, kiddush beis haknesses, when you're making kiddush in the shul, a milah, or by circumcision. And there's no child to drink from the cup of blessing. So then you should drink a full revius. And then it's good that you should and then you're fine. You filled the obligation, like it's explained in 269. However, im evsher toiv sheyishta oid revius shlema milvad revius sheyetze beidei chivas kiddush k'dei lotzeis lev'yakel. So basically, the ideal way of doing this, if you have wine and you have to make sud on wine, is you should drink a full revius for kiddush, and then drink another full revius for makam seuda. However, let's say you don't have whatever it is, it's not practical. It's whatever, you should at least drink a reiv revius for kiddush, the most of a revius, and additionally drink another full revius for the meal. If you weren't able to, and it's pressing, and whatever it is, and b'diavad, whatever, if you drank just the one full revius, Now remember, if you're only drinking just the Kiddush one and you're not drinking another Revius, then you have to make sure that the Kiddush that you drink is itself a full Revius, not the Reiv of a Revius. Most of a Revius doesn't count here for this, even if it counts for the Kiddush. So then at minimum you should drink a full Revius when you make Kiddush, and have in mind that that's the Seudah. Even better is if you drink at least most of a Revius for Kiddush, and another full Revius for the meal. And best is if you drink a full Revius for Kiddush, and then you drink another full Revius by for the meal. Notes.
He fulfills his obligation, right? So in place of one's meal. So the Minchas Shabbos derives the following law from this. A person who says Kiddush and drank one revius of wine but didn't eat anything else should not say Kiddush again when he partakes of his meal, because it's possible he did fulfill his obligation with Kiddush he previously recited, because he did have revius. I'm just wondering if it goes back to like what we said before with the whole Ein Sarich, whatever, back in Aleph. I don't know. I don't have the head for it right now. Trying to think about it, but that's just, yeah. And if possible, he should listen to the recitation of Kiddush by another person in order to fulfill his obligation, and then must partake of a meal in that place. I guess just in case it's not. But the Minchas Shabbos seems to say that you're having revius after you make Kiddush, that could be, considered the Makim Suda. And you could rely on, so the Chachamim said a meal has to be eaten only in a place where Kiddush was said, where you didn't drink a full revius of wine, and you could rely on their words when necessary. For example, when making Kiddush in a shul. According to the custom, the Kiddush is said in shul, like we said in Reish Samach Tes, or at a bris. So a kid's not present to give him to drink from a cup of wine, right? So during a bris, the bracha said over wine. If the bris is being held on Shabbos, there's no kid present. I remember there's a Shabbos bris. It's like a whole specific way to do it, where you make Kiddush as part of the bris. It's like a whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
So if the bris is being held on Shabbos, no kid present to drink the wine. The person who's reciting the bracha must consider the wine as his Kiddush. Thus, if the meal celebrating the bris is being served elsewhere, where there will be a delay between drinking that wine and partaking of the meal, the person reciting the bracha will face a quandary. He can resolve it by drinking revius and relying on the lenient view stated here. The outlet of his words here shed light on another issue, that although mitzvahs are not performed in bundles, or you say more psachim, and we quoted earlier in Reish Ayin Aleph, reciting the bracha over the bris and kiddush at the same time is not considered performing mitzvahs bundles, and that comes from Leket Tziyun of Haris. It is a very interesting thing, because Taka, like that's I remember the last bris. Well, because I've been a couple brisim since then, including my own son's, that was on Shabbos, but we did it later. We did it in the afternoon so that people could walk up. So it wasn't right after davening, as is tradition, before Aleinu. But the last time it was at a bris where it was Taka after Aleinu and it was on Shabbos, was actually in Keser Torah before they had to move out or whatever. It's like a couple of years back. It was like one of the Nadich's bris. But anyway, remember, it was like a whole thing. Rabbi Rosenblum made this whole announcement, and they brought like a little, because it's not in the room. They didn't do it in the room where they have the meal. It was in the showroom. So they brought a little plate of cookies. They had this whole thing. He's going to make Kiddush. And Rabbi Rosenblum said, I'm going to make Kiddush again in the next room. Whoever wants to be into this Kiddush could be, but if you are, then make sure you also have some cookies or whatever. Make them famous.
If you remember the Nadish Briz, there was the additional whole complication of the fact that it was on Sukkot.
So then it wasn't Nadish. It wasn't Nadish. This was in the showroom. I don't remember whose bris.
No. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was one before that. But I remember there was a Nadish bris that was in. But that was in the JCC, in the new Keser already. In like
I'm talking about, this was the old. This is the.
So maybe it was. Maybe it was a prior Nadish bris.
Right. So you're saying this one though is also out in the sukkah. So, but they had to in the shul. They had to go out to the sukkah.
So you have to. Right. It was a whole thing of. And by the way, I don't remember what it was, but it was this whole complicated thing of, because now you're gonna go and have to make kiddush in the sukkah, and like so
So what did they do? Did they just go do it all outside in the sukkah, or was it more important to do it in a shul? Because there's a whole thing actually about what do they do?
I told you that they said, man, this is complicated. Thank God Rabbi Rosenblum's here. That's what they did.
Don't tell them to do. There you go.
Because even this is after the fact. I don't remember how it was what the seder was, how it had to be done.
No, l'chaim. That's what happens. Okay.
What I
Fine.
do remember is an extreme thing of Hashgacha Pratis by that one.
Mhm.
Is that somehow the Rebbe's letter didn't make it there that day.
Mm.
There was a bris in Lubavitch Center in the Sukkah the day before, and I was reading the Rebbe's letter for that, I think. So I was looking it over before, and I forget, there was something that caught my eye about which, as if I haven't never read that letter before, but there was something that caught my eye about the Lashon or something. So it's really, anyway, so just so happened that next day it was fresh in my mind. I was able to read the Rebbe's letter without the Rebbe's letter.
Nice. There you go.
So it was bichlal. It added something more interesting to an already quite interesting, which fits. We are talking different age here, so very, 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 very fitting that you know.
It's a little more unique.
Fun situation. Yeah.
Okay. Yud.
Where are we? Yud.
Yep.
Im Kiddush b'seich beis v'shama shechene ya Kiddush mimeno. Kishu b'teich b'ayis shaloi. V'shulchan lefano, Aruch lefano. V'lech l'miyad beis imakim. If he makes Kiddush, and
Markel makes Kiddush with his window open.
Yeah, and his neighbor hears Kiddush from him, from his house, and his meal is set in front of him. Yaitzi bei yedei chevasei. He does fulfill his obligation. Why? Because he is in the place of his Yehuda, and he heard Kiddush in the place of his Yehuda. Even though the guy making Kiddush is in a different place, this doesn't make a difference. Now, obviously, which this is not just in this case, but as we said in a prior sif, is that the person making Kiddush has to always have in mind the people who are being yaitze from him, and the people being yaitze have to have in mind to be yaitze from that Kiddush. So we're not talking about a case where he just happened to overhear it, because in that case, the guy who's making Kiddush doesn't have him in mind. We're talking, he sees him through the window, he picks up his cup, hey, Shmuley, have me in mind, he yells through his window. And the guy goes, okay, and he makes algae or whatever, and he makes Kiddush. And then he answers Amen. He's Yaitze. Let's say he not only that, he wants to do it in an ideal way. So he has his own cup of wine that's not pugum. He drinks from his cup of wine. Boom, he's Yaitze on Kiddush, and he's having a Kiddush in the place of his Suda. As long as he had in mind to be Yaitze him, and he had in mind to be Yaitze for him. This is a fun sif, no? And this is even not just if it happened that way. Like, oh, you did something stupid, you yelled out to your neighbor, what's it called, and he was yaitze you, now what, were you yaitze or not? No, you can do it in the first place. You can do it this way.
Meaning, back when COVID was going on, someone could be like, oh, I forgot to get wine before Shabbos. Yell to us, Matel, open your window, have you in mind for Kiddush. Then you're good. Yeah. Good to go.
And as long as their windows were 6 feet away from each other, no problem.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying, in such a situation, you couldn't go over to your friend's house and ask, can I join you for Kiddush, have a little Suda, and go back to your house? It's not an option. You wouldn't be able to go over. Forget about not being able to carry wine. So fine, you go to your friend's house,
right?
Kiddush, Suda, and then go back to your house.
Let's say somebody has a cast on. He can't go down from the whatever it is, right? Or I'm sitting in my house, right? And I have a baby with me. I can't leave my house, leave the baby there, and I don't have wine. So right, same thing, yeah. So anyway, this is a very valuable. This is an Alter Rebbe life hack.
There So even lechatchila, sorry.
Yes, even lechatchila. ואפילו אם הוא איני איכל עדיין ואיני יצא בקידש זה, אלא שמקדש בשביל שכנו שנראים לקדש. And this is like just like any other case where you can make kiddush for somebody else. Is let's say the neighbor doesn't know how to make kiddush, right? So he can do it even if the neighbor who's making the kiddush is not going to have his meal now and is not going to be making kiddush. So he says that what's it called and gafen, etc. The whole thing, right? The other guy answers amen, and then the other guy drinks the revius and makes his meal.
Right.
Notes.
So what do we note? So fine. So we said even if either of the individuals do not have this intent, meaning so the listener does not fulfill his obligation, and you'll see as you saw in Reish Yud Gimel. Nevertheless, as stated in Siman 55, the listener does not have to be in the same place as the person reciting the bracha or the tefillah in order to fulfill his obligation by listening to the person's recitation. See also in 213, which makes similar statements to those of the main text above. Those listening to Kiddush do not have to taste the wine over which Kiddush is recited to fulfill their obligation. Even if they wish to partake of their own wine, they may fulfill their obligation for the bracha by Gafen with the bracha of the person who recited Kiddush. So that's absolutely allowed. We also brought up how the Frierdiker Rebbe told Weinberg, our minhag is actually everyone should say their own Bar Gafen, but technically you're totally allowed to be Yitzit from their Bar Gafen. That's it. Yod Aleph.
Yud Aleph, Misha Beis Samach Beis HaKnesses V'Shama Kiddush B'Seir Beisei Meshliach Tzibur L'Shem Kaz Beis HaKnesses. Somebody who's in his house, and his house is right like Rabbi Idkin's house. It's right next door to the shul, and he heard Kiddush in his house from the Shliach Tzibur, meaning the guy who's making the Kiddush loud in shul. And this case is not Yetzir. So if it was my house and your house, it's fine. But if he's hearing it from the guy in the shul, he's not Yetzir. Why? The Fishav is that nowadays that people, we don't have visitors, meaning visitors who are gonna sleep there, that are gonna sleep in the shul. Right. Once upon a time, the way it worked was you're going to visit a village, a town, a village, something. So you would go and you would, unless you knew somebody there, whatever. Let's say there was just a Jew in town. No problem. You sleep in the shul. Yeah. But nowadays, this is not something that we really do. So the person making kiddush there is not really having in mind to be, which is kind of a funny thing because in theory the whole reason you made it there was in case somebody isn't yaitz. So I wonder if now it went back the other way. The only reason he's making kiddush there is because there's a minhag to do that. Right. So I wonder if this doesn't apply when it's like, say, you make a kiddush or something, and usually, for example, like when Rabbi Rosenfeld makes kiddush in the shul, or any Rav makes kiddush in the shul, he's actually taka having in mind mamish to be yaitz everybody. So, and it's not just because the minhag. And in fact, in the case that there's no kiddush, we don't make kiddush in shul. So we don't even do this minhag of making kiddush in shul. The only reason we make kiddush in shul is because we're having a meal, a kiddush.
What do you mean? Like you're saying, like many Yom Tovim, for example. We don't do kiddush.
No. What I'm saying is that we do not follow this minhag. Okay, for example, Friday night we make kiddush in shul usually.
Right? No, we don't.
No, the only reason we do it in shul and day is not because we're making kiddush in the shul for the minhag. It's because we have a kiddush going on. So, for example, on Pesach, where there's usually no kiddushim in the shul.
So they're saying it's not just Pesach; it's other Yom Tovim as well. B'chlal Yom Tovim, there's no kiddush. But in the bottom line, right? And when that happens, nobody makes kiddush out loud. After davening, everybody goes home. So we don't have this minhag of making kiddush in the shul. The only reason we're making kiddush in the shul is because we're going to have a meal there. We're going to wait because there's talking to other people, etc. Yeah.
So yes, I was thinking this doesn't apply.
So the one note is on this point. So, and you'll see in Reish Test where these concepts are explained. Needless to say, if a person speaks to the Shlich Tzibur beforehand and arranges that he have in mind to enable him to fill his obligation, he can fill his obligation in this manner. That's from the Magen Avraham. Now, Lekhat Tziyun Ba'aris notes that in Reish Gimel 213, the Alter Rebbe mentioned an opinion that maintains that with regards to rabbinic ordinances, a person may fulfill his obligation by listening to a bracha recited by another person, even if neither of them intended that the listener's obligation be fulfilled through that recitation. But it still counts. Nevertheless, Aleph, the Alter Rebbe does not accept his opinion as halacha. He merely states, quote, one should take care that he does not enter a situation where there is doubt whether or not a bracha he recites will be in vain, end quote. And Beis, it's possible to say that Kiddush is different because it's rooted in a scriptural commandment, so it's a little different. But yeah.
Right.
All right, Yud Beis.
Now, ideally, one should make the meal at night in the place where the candles were lit. So this is an interesting thing to know because many people don't know this. Because they'll light candles at home and then they're going somewhere else to eat. So we should know that ideally one should eat the meal in the place where the candles were lit. Even if he's eating it, meaning the Seudah, when it's still day, right? The accepted Shabbos, right? Obviously after the appropriate time when one can already accept Shabbos, but it's still before Shabbos. The involuntary Shabbos starts. It's this. I voluntarily took it on myself earlier. Even so, ein lo lechel b'chatzeh. Now, obviously, generally speaking, the way it works, if I'm taking Shabbos early and we're going to eat early, that means that my wife is also going to be lighting candles early. So the same thing applies. Ein lo lechel b'chatzeh. He should not eat in the courtyard. Af im neneh sham yisrim pnei avir. Even if he enjoys it more because of the air, the fresh air. Am pnei hazavuvim. He enjoys it because of the flies. Oh, because he has
in his house. There's flies.
In his
so
house.
I want to wake it outside, so I'm not.
Right. See, it's funny. But now, by the way, this you can tell is their houses were a little bit how it worked in their house was a little bit different back then. Nowadays, it's like we're bothered outside by the flies, so we go inside. If there's a fly,
whoa, I have to say I have to disagree with you there. Sometimes there's problems. There's flies inside the house.
A lot.
We had. It doesn't have to be a lot for it to bother you. We had this problem last summer or springtime when it started to get warmer. There was like, I don't know what happened. I guess some of the flies, like they maybe laid eggs or something because there were just always flies inside our kitchen and dining room.
Sometimes attract fruit flies and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it was something like that. I'm not, maybe the kids spilled something. I don't know, but there was just flies inside. Being outside, okay, there might be a fly who lands, but they're not like staying in the same space and bubbling around you as like the same way.
Oh, very good.
But when it's stuck in your dining room and you hear this,
now remember that's nowadays. So imagine how much more so in those days when they didn't have like our refrigerator. They didn't have, for example, in my house in the summer. I don't know if it's that comfortable for a fly. I don't think flies necessarily like 68 degrees. You know.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. Right, but so then Mistama and our houses are sealed better, etc., etc. So this was probably a lot more of a problem back then.
But either way, you should still have it inside by the burning lights. But
you should have it. And by the way, one interesting thing to note is this is why we generally we light the candles in the sukkah.
Right, so that we eat by the candles. Yeah.
And on Sukkot, we have the candles in the Sukkah because the candle is supposed to be in the Makim Seudah. And I know a lot of times what people do is because because they shouldn't have a problem it blows out. They have like different. They actually make things for them, but even if you don't have one of those special ones, it's made of the glass thing. So sometimes people do it like inside of a fish tank or something like that, like a small fish tank or whatever it is. To keep the wind from putting it out.
They have especially made boxes like that for Hanukkah menorahs, for those that have the minhag to do by the door, outside by the door or whatever. Right. Like in Eretz Yisrael, all over the place.
Yeah, so I've seen people who do candles, and that also I've actually seen people who do candles not even inside because they're going to have the windows open, or even just because so they don't like to prevent that. Not they should fall over and
The way we did it,
keep running around the things.
my sukkah is in the area of our backyard. There's this area at the bottom of the driveway that's right outside the window of the dining room.
Yeah.
So I pushed our dining room table up against the windowsill, and we lit all the Shabbos Yom Tov candles there, and the blinds were wide open. So you're both just sitting in the sukkah, seeing the candles at the window.
Right.
It had like a Hanukkah vibe to it.
So
Because it's like through a window.
That's a good question. Is seeing it in this case considered b'mokim? Which is funny.
So we're saying
I
sight
because you'll say that. I think you'll say that actually.
A big thing by Markel was we'll get the
No,
whatever.
I think you'll say that right now. Afim hu mitztayel harbe b'bayis mipnei hasharav or mipnei hazvuvim.
Something else.
Right? Even if he is having a lot of what is it? I think because it's hot.
Not even, but so we just said that even if there's flies
one of the
or whatever,
reasons he went out because it's fresh air and inside it's hot, right? So, or because
if it's mitzvah harbe, if it's really bothering him.
And here he says it. So which would
he doesn't see them,
right? Which would imply that the Makkah Masuda, it would imply that the guideline for that is you can see them. Because the whole point of the Shabbos candles, right, is that you're benefiting from their light, right? That's why there's the whole question of if you're on the road or in a hospital and you have no way that you can light candles. Can you take? They have actually these the little flicker candles, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you use that? And different. By the way, different place can hold different. Ask your local Rav. Don't talk to me about it. Ask your Rav what to do. And by the way, your Rav may answer you one way or the other, or it may depend on the situation. In one situation, he may say, well, wait a second, so why can't you do X, Y, Z? And you'll say, he'll say, no, you should do that. In either case, I believe that was it Shtem Zalman Auerbach who actually doesn't, he doesn't like the idea. I'm trying to remember who it was, if that's who it was. But in either case, but he says in the end, he says, but if you did it that way, you definitely don't have to add another candle. You know, like how if you missed lighting candles to add another candle, you have to add another candle after it. So he says, but you definitely don't have to do that. If you did that, it's for sure you don't have to do it.
Good idea.
So, right.
I will say when we packed our baby bag.
Yeah. So what's
we would pack basically 2 regular tea lights and 2 of those little the switch tea lights, just in case they wouldn't let us burn.
So what's the whole point of doing these little tea lights? It's the fact that I'm turning on a light. In other words, ideally, we do it with fire or whatever, but really the whole thing isn't about fire. The whole thing is that I'm adding light for Shabbos, and I'm adding a light to benefit from for Shabbos, and that's the Havamina. That's in other words, the logic behind why turning a light on and saying like it's the covered Shabbos or whatever is a thing. So we see that the whole reasoning behind Shabbos candles is to benefit from the light. So over here, your Shabbos candles are causing you tsar, they're causing you discomfort and pain. Then so obviously it's not what we want, and therefore if it's really bothering him to be in the house. Then he can go even if he can't see the candles. Rakshi Yizoir Shiornedis Aruchim Sheyidliku Adalayla. However, he should take care. Now, I don't think he's necessarily now talking about. I don't think he's necessarily talking about whether you can see them or not. I think
either way. Just make sure that they're big.
Meaning, I think he's jumping back to the fact that if you even if you lit them even if you lit them when it's still day before Shabbos started,
right? Well, or even just the fact that back to the beginning, when you eat the meal, the candle should be burning, because that's something I wanted to bring up. Right. Some people, they dilly dally on their way back from shul, or they dilly dally while they get home and then they're setting up the table. No, you got to be kiddush before the candles go out.
That's one thing. The other thing I think he's also talking about is if you're eating while it's still day, you're right. So in that case, fine. I ate in the place the Su'udah.
Right.
But in addition, there's two things here. One thing is your candles should be on when you're eating. Which, by the way, lav dafke doesn't mean your candles have to be lit for your whole seuda. As we established before, when you eat a kazayis, that's your seuda. So you should make sure the candles are lit at least through like your hamaitzi. Right. Or if you're going to be eating mezainis now and then make a hamaitzi later, whatever it is. But through this thing like we said, or if you're going to have 2 cups of wine, in either case, through that you made your seuda in the place where your candles were. That's A. B is that the candles need to continue burning into the night. They have to be
right.
Right. Even though you accepted Shabbos early, the candles still need to burn a little bit at least.
When Shabbos itself comes in, right, which could be after Tzei, so yeah, it needs to go to after Tzei.
Explained in 263. See there.
Yeah. Okay. So now there's one note of significance that back to the point actually of so he says Taka, if it's so much sar. So you could go outside, make Kiddush, even though you're not seeing the Shabbos lights. Over there, they bring the Kaf HaChaim, who brings up, there's actually Kabbalistic reasons, esoteric reasons for the Shabbos meal to be eaten where the Shabbos candles are burning. And I think we're saying, regardless of seeing them or not, no, Bim Makkah should be in a space. So therefore, he suggests kindling a Shabbos light outside in a manner that it will not be extinguished by the wind. Meaning, as far as I remember, I think I actually learned this in the Kavachayim before, but either way, what is that, from what I remember, I think I understood, is that even if you light the rest of your Shabbos candles inside, okay, you should have at least one light that's not going to go out, that's a Shabbos candle that's by your, like at your meal on the table.
Right.
So get one of those, smelly lights, or get one of those things that's even if you just have one that has like a lantern cover, something, so you're eating by a Shabbos candle. And not just that you can see the Shabbos candles, but actually eat by a Shabbos candle, which, oddly enough, if you will, by Sukkot, because it was Sukkot and it still can be very warm, we did have those. They were called citronella candles, and they kept the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Burning my each meal. No. Anyway, but yeah, it could be. That could be a Shabbos candle. Anyway, just.
So the next Siman is going to be 276. I think it's getting to time where if I make more noise here, I'm going to be waking the baby up.
Yes, so let's go tomorrow morning.
Are you pretty much open all day tomorrow?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, me too. So I think what we're going to aim to do then is tomorrow will be a special day in Shulchan Aruch podcast history, and we're going to pretty much I try to do a marathon.
Sounds good.
Good. And yeah, so fine, good. So what time is good for you? I guess we'll be in touch in the morning. But if you can do 9ish or something like that, whatever, fine. Okay, good. So tomorrow is the Shulchan Aruch marathon. Again, Mazel Tov to our executive producer on his birthday, and you should have a Shnaz Bracha V'Atzlacha and Parnasa and all the brachas, and especially the main bracha that he should dance with Mashiach Tzidkenu in Yerushalayim HaKadosh in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi right away.
Amen.
All righty. See you in the morning.
See you in the morning. Morgan in the free.